There is a printout sitting in a filing cabinet inside the Cairo Geological Survey building on Corniche El Nil. It looks, at first glance, like interference, like static, like the kind of background noise you'd expect from a muon tomography array pointed at 4,000 years of accumulated limestone. Most people who saw it thought exactly that. They filed it, they moved on, they had other things to do. But one Italian physicist named Filippo Bondi did not move on. He looked at the printout for a long time. He ran the numbers again. He adjusted the calibration. He cross-referenced it against the ground-penetrating radar data his team had collected in the same location. And then he went quiet, because buried inside what looked like noise was a shape, a deliberate, geometric, impossible shape, located directly beneath one of the most studied monuments on Earth. A monument that has been staring at the eastern horizon for at least 4,500 years, possibly far longer, and has not, in all that time, given up what is underneath it. This is the story of what that shape appears to be, and why it might be the most significant archaeological finding of the last century, if anyone is allowed to dig it up. If you've never seen one of our investigations before, subscribe now. We cover ancient discoveries that mainstream media doesn't stop to explain. Hit the bell. You won't want to miss what comes next in this series. Let's start at the beginning. Not with the scam, with the text. The Westcar Papyrus is one of the oldest surviving pieces of literature on Earth. It now sits in the Egyptian collection of the Berlin State Museums, catalog number P, Berlin 3000 M33. It was purchased from a dealer in 1839 by a British collector named Henry Westcar, and it eventually made its way to Carl Richard Lepsius, who recognized what he had. The papyrus dates, in its physical form, to the Second Intermediate Period, somewhere around 1600 BCE. But the stories written on it are considered by most Egyptologists to be copies of originals from the 5th dynasty, which places the source material inside the period immediately following the construction of the pyramids at Giza. Approximately 2400 BCE. This is not a fringe document. This is a museum piece. It is studied. It is cited. It is taught in university courses on ancient Egyptian literature. And buried inside it is something that shouldn't exist. The papyrus tells the story of Pharaoh Khufu, the man credited with building the Great Pyramid, hosting a gathering of his sons and asking them to entertain him with miraculous tales. Near the end of the narrative, Khufu asks about an old magician, a man named Jedi. He specifically wants to know if Jedi can find something. Not gold, not land, not power. Khufu asks whether Jedi can find the number of the secret chambers of the sanctuary of Thoth. Think about that for a moment. The builder of the largest structure in the ancient world, at the height of his power, is not asking for the secrets of the afterlife. He is not asking for military victories. He is asking a magician to locate hidden rooms. Specific rooms in a specific place associated with the god Thoth. JD answers, and his answer is extraordinary. He says he does not know the number of the chambers, but he knows where they are. He says there is a chest made of firestone. The Egyptian word is bayat, sometimes translated as meteoric iron or simply hardstone, in a room called the Inventory in Heliopolis. For decades, scholars dismissed this as symbolic, a metaphor for sacred knowledge, a literary device. Then, modern surveying technology found something that changed everything. Here's where it gets strange. In April of 1991, a geologist from Boston University named Robert Schoch arrived at Giza with a seismic survey team. His collaborator was Thomas Dobecki from the firm McBride, Ratcliffe and Associates. Their purpose was twofold: to analyze the weathering patterns in the Sphinx enclosure and to search for voids in the bedrock beneath and around the Sphinx itself. This was legitimate scientific fieldwork. Peer-reviewed, published in the journal Geoarchaeology in 1992. What the seismic refraction tomography found was this: the bedrock beneath the Sphinx is not uniform. The subsurface weathering is inconsistent, which Schoch argued as evidence that different portions of the Sphinx were exposed to the elements at different times, meaning the structure may be far older than the Fourth Dynasty. But that finding, explosive as it was not what stopped the conversation in the field that day. What stopped it was the cavity. The seismic data showed a series of voids beneath the floor of the Sphinx enclosure, on the north side, on the south side, and, critically, directly between the front paws. A cavity of significant dimensions positioned symmetrically beneath the area protected by the Sphinx's outstretched forelimbs. The data suggested this cavity was not a natural fissure. Natural fissures in limestone follow the fracture lines of the rock. They are irregular. They run at angles. They thin and widen unpredictably. This anomaly was different. It appeared rectangular in plan. It appeared to have measurable depth. Dobecki estimated it at roughly 9 to 12 meters below the current surface. Rectangular, symmetrical, man-made in appearance, directly beneath the front paws of the Great Sphinx of Giza. Not a natural hollow, not a collapsed tomb shaft, a shaped space. And if that's true, it means our history is missing a chapter. Let's go back to the texts. Because the Westcar Papyrus is not the only ancient source that describes something hidden at this location. In 1858, a French Egyptologist named Auguste Mariette was excavating near the Sphinx when his workers uncovered a fragment of limestone stela. He almost missed it. It had been partially buried by wind-blown sand, and the lower portion was already damaged. But what remained was enough to change the argument about who built the Sphinx, or more precisely, who found it. The stela is now in the Cairo Museum, catalog number CG 17779. It is called the Inventory Stela, and it describes events during the reign of Khufu, the same pharaoh who appears in the Westcar Papyrus. According to the Inventory Stela, Khufu did not build the Sphinx. He found it. He found it already ancient, already worn, already damaged. The text describes him ordering repairs. It refers to the Sphinx as existing in the time of the gods, long before the Fourth Dynasty had laid a single stone. Now, mainstream Egyptology pushes back hard on this stela. They point out that its style of hieroglyphic writing matches the 26th dynasty, the Sete period, roughly 670 BCE, more than 1800 years after Khufu. They argue it is pseudo-historical propaganda written by Sete priests to legitimize their local cults. This is a reasonable objection. It matters, but that explanation has a problem. The site priests were copying from something. Ancient Egyptian scribal tradition is clear on this point. Priests in later dynasties did not fabricate records wholesale. They updated them, they embellished them, they repurposed them for political aims. But their records were almost always grounded in earlier source material, some of which no longer exists. If the Inventory Stela was propaganda, what was it copying? And here's the other problem. The Westcar Papyrus, which comes from an entirely different tradition with no connection to the Sate period, tells the same basic story from a different angle. Khufu, searching for something hidden. Khufu, obsessed with a location already known to contain chambers. Two separate ancient sources separated by time and tradition, converging on the same idea. There is something beneath or near the Sphinx that was placed there before the Fourth Dynasty. They weren't guessing, they were recording. Now let's look at the third clue. This one is physical. It is still standing on the Giza plateau. You can go see it today. It sits between the front paws of the Sphinx itself, the Dream Stele of Thutmose IV. Around 1400 BCE, a young Egyptian prince was on a hunting expedition near the Giza plateau. He stopped to rest in the shadow of the Sphinx, which at that time was buried up to its neck in sand. According to the stela he later erected, the Sphinx spoke to him in a dream. It promised him the throne of Egypt if he would clear the sand from its body. He woke up. He gave the order. The sand was removed. He became pharaoh. The Dream Stele records this encounter. Most of the text is legible. The carving is reasonably well preserved. But there is one section, a section that scholars have cataloged as defaced, that describes what the Sphinx contains. The surviving glyphs in that section include a phrase commonly rendered as "from the beginning of time" or "since the first occasion." The Egyptian concept of Zep Tepi, the first time, the primordial era before recorded history, when the gods walked the earth. The Sphinx is described as holding something connected to that era. The lower portion of the stela, the section that might have described what specifically the Sphinx holds, is damaged. Some erosion. Some deliberate scoring. No one has established with certainty whether the damage is ancient or more recent. What we do know is this. 3 ancient sources, the Westcar Papyrus from the Old Kingdom period, the Inventory Stela from the Sate period, and the Dream Stele from the 18th dynasty. Each describe the Sphinx as a site connected to something older than Egypt, something containing hidden or preserved knowledge, something associated specifically with the god Thoth, who was the Egyptian deity of wisdom, writing, science, and recorded history. It was sealed, it was mapped, and then it disappeared from the official record. Now, here is where the modern story picks up. Because in 2025, something changed. Filippo Bondi and his Cafre project brought a combined array of muon tomography detectors and ground-penetrating radar units to the Giza plateau. Muon tomography is the same technology used to peer inside the pyramids. It tracks cosmic ray particles called muons as they pass through solid material. Dense material absorbs more muons, empty space absorbs fewer. When you map the differential, you can see voids inside stone structures with extraordinary precision. It is not speculative, it is physics. It has been used in volcanology, in nuclear facility inspection, in the scanning of the Pyramid of Khufu and the Pyramid of Khafre by separate international teams. Bondi's team pointed their detectors at the Sphinx. The data from the combined GPR and muon array confirmed what the 1991 seismic survey had suggested. There is a void beneath the front paws, a significant void. But the muon tomography, with its greater resolution, added something the seismic survey could not determine in 1991. The void is not alone. Inside the larger void, the density mapping shows a secondary anomaly. A region of slightly higher density nested within the hollow space. A shape within a shape. A rectangular void with what appears to be a rectangular solid object inside it. Not similar, not inspired by it. The same geometry described in the Westcar Papyrus. A room, and inside the room, a chest. Bondi has been careful with his language. He has stated that the data is still undergoing peer review. He has declined to call it a tomb or a chamber or a repository. He has described it as an anomaly of significant geometric regularity. He has noted that natural limestone processes do not produce nested rectangular anomalies of this kind. He has said the data warrants investigation. The peer review process is ongoing. The publication timeline is uncertain. The investigation has not been given permission to proceed to the excavation phase. Now we need to talk about why. The figure most associated with controlling access to the Giza plateau for the last 4 decades is Zahi Hawass, the former Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities. Hawass has been one of the most effective archaeological gatekeepers in modern history. He has also blocked, redirected, or publicly discredited almost every effort to investigate the subsurface of the Sphinx since the 1970s. In 1978, a team affiliated with the Edgar Cayce Foundation was permitted to conduct a limited radar survey near the Sphinx. The data suggested anomalies. Their access was revoked before they could conduct follow-up surveys. In 1996, A team from Florida State University, using ground-penetrating radar, found what they described as a rectangular anomaly beneath the left paw of the Sphinx at a depth of approximately 8 meters. Their full report was submitted to Egyptian authorities. It was reviewed. The team was not invited back. Hawass has publicly stated on multiple occasions that there is nothing beneath the Sphinx. He has called the Hall of Records legend a hallucination. He has described independent researchers investigating the site as pyramidiates. He is not wrong that the fringe literature around the Sphinx contains a great deal of nonsense. He is also the man who holds the keys. No excavation has been permitted beneath the front paws. Not in 1991. Not in 1996. Not since. The official explanation for this is the preservation of the monument. Excavation beneath a 4,500-year-old limestone structure requires extraordinary engineering and carries real risk. That is a legitimate concern. It is also a conveniently irrefutable one. Now, does this prove the most extreme version of the story? Probably not. There is no direct evidence that the chamber, if it exists, contains ancient libraries or pre-dynastic technology or anything dramatic. The most grounded version of what the scans may be showing is this: a natural or semi-natural cave system in the limestone bedrock, modified at some point in antiquity, possibly used for ritual storage, possibly sealed during a period of political transition, possibly containing material culture objects of the kind found in other Sphinx-related excavations. Ceramics, votive objects, small statues. The nested anomaly, the object within the room, could be a natural limestone pillar, a dense mineral deposit, or the remnant of a natural process of karst formation. This would not be extraordinary by archaeological standards. It would still be, by any measure, a significant find. But that doesn't make the discovery ordinary, because even in its most conservative interpretation, a sealed void of geometric regularity beneath the front paws of the Great Sphinx of Giza, a void that no modern archaeologist has entered, that no camera has filmed, that no core sample has confirmed, is a discovery of enormous consequence. If it is a room modified by human hands before the Fourth Dynasty, the implications are staggering. Robert Schoch's geological argument places the weathering of the Sphinx enclosure within a window of 7,000 to 9,000 years ago, corresponding to a period when the Sahara was wet, when monsoon rains swept across North Africa, when the landscape around Giza would have looked nothing like it does today. A period before the invention of the hieroglyphic writing system, before the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, before the Narmer Palette, before any civilization we currently recognize in the North African record. If someone carved the Sphinx during that period, and if they placed something inside the bedrock beneath it, then we are not talking about a missing chapter in Egyptian history. We are talking about a missing chapter in human history. A chapter that begins thousands of years before the earliest written records, in a civilization we have not yet found, in a language we cannot yet read, preserving knowledge in a stone container beneath a monument designed to last forever. And the text of the Westcar Papyrus becomes something else entirely. Not mythology, not ritual literature, not a metaphor for wisdom. A location report, written by people who knew where the chest was, who had been to the room, who understood that the contents were important enough to record in a story designed to be copied and recopied, generation after generation, so that the information would survive whatever catastrophe they apparently feared was coming. A firestone chest, in a room, beneath the lion that faces the rising sun. The description was always there. We just weren't reading it correctly. Here is where the script of history has one final, unresolved line. In 2025, the muon tomography data from Bondi's team sits in a state of review. It has not been published in a peer-reviewed journal as of this investigation. The Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities has not commented on the specific findings. No excavation permit has been requested, at least not publicly. The Sphinx sits as it has always sat, oriented toward the eastern horizon, its eroded limestone face slowly deteriorating under the Giza wind. Its shadow crossing the same ground it has crossed since before any written record says it was built. The void is still there. The object within the void is still there. No one has gone down to look. No one has been given permission to go down to look. And the chest of firestone, if that is what the density mapping is showing, remains sealed in its room, in the inventory, in the oldest structure on Earth, exactly where the Westcar Papyrus said it would be. Not a myth, not a metaphor, a coordinate. And we still haven't opened the door. If this investigation raised more questions than it answered, that's exactly the point. That is what this subject demands from honest inquiry. The next video in this series goes deeper into the seismic survey data from 1991, the specific measurements Dobecki published, and what they reveal when compared against the 2025 scan results side by side. The comparison is something you need to see for yourself. It's linked on screen right now. Click it. And if this script gave you something to think about, leave a like before you go. It takes 2 seconds, and it is the single most effective way you can support investigations like this. 1. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you in the next one.